Um, I'll shut it down in a little bit in case y'all are shy on the camera. um, the SPY has given us a little bit of a mixed what's happening, I guess, with institution buying. We're more or less in a consolidation phase right now because of our, strikes that we've been having going on. The close, after the close, we had quite a bit of dark pool transactions come through. We had a pretty heavy hitter come in, over 612 million just on one hit all alone. That was probably the biggest one that came through. Those are actually happening live. They're not late prints that are going across the pond, but more or less, right now they're trading at 322 80 or excuse me, 322.51 is the majority of the prints, and the large one that came through was at 322.41. They had a little bit of slippage because the print was so large. But being said at that, usually when we get a lot of prints coming through, that's a sign of a push or a pull. We are trading a few cents above that number. I don't really feel confident that this is actually a buy. This could be a potential sell. The prints that come in on the late side are the ones that really push the market to make massive directional changes. We have not gotten those in. They came in the Monday before Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We had over 15 prints come through on the late side. That's the ones that they try to hide the most of the direction they're trying to move the market. That's what's given us our push that we've had continuing through the holiday, through the Santa Claus rally. That kind of kicked off the Santa Claus rally. Normally, Santa Claus rally is kind of over around the 3rd of January is when it kind of starts slowing down, or we call it kind of a completion, more or less. People start coming back to work on usually every year, right about the 3rd of January is when people start coming back to the market. So Monday is going to be kind of pins and needles, you may say, based upon any type of military action that may happen over in the Middle East that can create the volatility in the market. So at this point, we just got to keep an eye on that price of 322.51, 41, right around that ballpark, to see if we're going to be trading above or below. That's pretty much the line in the sand right now for the institutions. Downside move as far as any type of major correction. They were buying this thing up originally way down here at 319.38. That's where they were doing the buying power back here around the right before the holiday. And that's what's pushed it up. And we've been able to hold that area. We came pretty damn close on the drop off of that news of that attack, but we bounced off of it, off of the pre-market session at that area, which has more or less created a sideways box area between the topping area that we had before the strike and then the bottoming area. So this is the reason why that we're in this zone right now in the market. We're basically in this sideways action. So just more or less put this right here in the print. And this is pretty much our line in the sand that we're looking at as far as if we are going to have a continuation on the market or we're going to wind up pushing higher or not. Is basically going to be all based upon these two levels, this right up here and down here. So until we break one of these two areas, we're really not going to have a good sense of direction. It is. We are massively overbought on so many stocks at this point. We've got a lot of crab patterns, sharks developing throughout massive amounts of stocks in there. We're overdue. We're overdue for a pullback. But being said, the pullback that we had off of that terrible news that happened, more or less, I guess you could say it's good news, bad news. I mean, it's good we get rid of a terrorist, but at the same time, bad news is that we may be going into a conflict at the same time. So it's a matter of an opinion, I guess. But more or less, the market only pulled back off of its last impulse leg 23%. We didn't have this massive snap down to 61, 78. We didn't have this scared mentality coming into the market that would create a massive sell-off. So this is more or less a wait and see zone is where we're at, because we're grinding around the 23. We start breaking below the 23. This is the key area right here, 319.38. Just write that down on your charts, 319.38. We start dipping below that, we're going to start seeing corrections start taking place. That is where they bought it at. So we're going to be basically in a wait and see on the market. Just play intraday price action mainly until we start seeing a good direction in the market. If you're going to do swings, just make sure that you do your risk management really good. Mainly because I'm saying that we have more potential of a downside move than an upside move, because we got negative media coming out, and we've also are being basically majorly overextended in general. So we'll go through a few of the charts I have, and then we can start opening up for y'all guys to ask whatever your other charts that you want us to pull up. And GUP has been pushing pretty hard the last few days, and we're coming up to the 127 top. We've got more or less a development of a pattern with the 127, and we're starting to get a little bit of a pullback going into the close. So I'm looking at this as a potential topping zone up here for GUP for a potential pullback. Now the pullback, we do basically just need to look at, normally I would like pull back from here on the measurements, but because we had a little stair step here, this is where I would normally do the measurements at for the pullback down to the 23. But since we kind of had a small pullback here just to be safe, and we're talking more swing than anything else, we should just go off of this little pulse, because this will be a little bit more accurate for intraday purposes. Swing purposes, we want to come down to this leg here. So we've already crossed the 23. We're coming down to 38. Now, you notice we have a 38 at this line. If we pull back this area over here and measure this instead, what do we have? We have the 23 at the same spot. So that is something we need to kind of look at, is more, we've got clustering happening right around this area. We've got a daily level that we're looking at. We've got more or less what I call an hourly level, because it's happened over a few days to develop all around the clustering. So I'm looking for GUP to pull back to about 138.17. So you got about $1 on the downside, and that's going to be the key area if we're going to actually hold for a continuation and pop back up, or if we're going to break. We start going sub that area, then you can take it down to 155, and that's where the real money's going to be at, guys, as far as trying to take it down past this level, because it's already had the initial topping drop. Your short was up here at the top at the 127. And you may say, well, how would I know to take a short position off of it up here? All you got to do is just measure it out and basically see that 127 is usually respected 90% of the time. So more or less, you take your shorter start position. This would be where you want to be taking profits if you're in the short. If you want to kind of chase it down here, just be somewhat cautious. Put your stop loss over here at 160 area, but look at it as a potential dollar downside move. I'm more concerned about it just coming down here, kind of seeing if we get a basing and a curl back up, or if we wind up actually snapping down. The overextension is kind of taken care of on the hourly charts, so it's kind of freed up to where the moving average over that time could be pulling up at the same area to give it an extra support. So the key question is this is going to be support or not, if we're actually going to have more breakdown to come down to this level. We break from here to there, that's where we got the decent money. We got a good $3 drop that we can have, and that's where the points are going to kick in. RUHN has been pushing up to the 61s, tested it, popped over, came back, confirmed on the test, and now we've got the downside move on it. We're still holding the overall upward trend off of this stock, but what I'd like to actually kind of see more or less on this is I'd like to see a little pullback and test around this area, see what we get. If we start breaking that area, then you got more of a downside move. You got about $1 drop you can get it down to come back. Now, this is on the upside on the measurement, so we actually need to invert it to go the opposite direction to actually see how much of an actual pullback. See, we're hanging around the 38 right now, And this level down here we'd be looking at would be around 70-ish or so. So if we can break this this downward trend, then we can get it down to around the 70, 61, somewhere in that ballpark. At that point, you could see a potential bounce that could possibly start occurring. You've got the 200 on the hour right around this level too to be concerned about. So I believe your support's going to be right around this zone, somewhere between the 61 and the 70. You'll probably get some good support. We've got clustering happening right in this area, so you can look for a potential dip by an opportunity. Key thing is seeing if we can break that structured level on the downside move. We don't get an actual bounce because you're at the 50 on the daily and you're on the 38 on the hourly. So this could be an actual potential bounce to continue the upward channel to push it a little bit higher to create a larger, bigger picture pattern. So just keep an eye in this zone in that area of it. LMT, Lockheed Martin. Okay, Lockheed Martin is something we need to be concerned about with potential war problems. But their stock will go up more based upon anything that happens. So we had a nice pop yesterday off of the news of the strike. We had a nice little pullback. If the escalation settles down, I'd be interested in taking a short position on this pattern that has developed over the last quarter and a half, or quarter, I guess you could say, because we're actually past the earnings a little bit, for a pullback of about 38%. So technically, I'd like to see a short, but fundamentally, because of the reactions that's going on in the Middle East, this thing can continue climbing based upon news of any potential war, because Lockheed Martin is probably one of the go-to stocks in the market when it comes to wartime. SAVA, that was a beautiful stock running yesterday. We got the announcement in the chat yesterday around the $7 area for this thing to start taking off, and we got this thing pushing up into 10 plus. We were talking about this on the mic pretty much all for the whole 3 points. Anybody who was missing the actual initial announcement, Adam actually announced this in the chat room yesterday, right around this price point. It was more or less a chase at that point if you didn't get in right at his announcement. But we had an opportunity up here around the $9 zone that you could have taken it up to grab it for another 1.5 or so before it had its downside move on the pullback. So more or less when we look at what's happening with this stock and looking at it on an hourly basis, is we are pushing above the 38 on the actual initial move overall. I like to see it can come down to kind of consolidate a little bit, and a potential possible run back up to 11.43 if we see the price action start coming back in. We had a significant drop out of the topping area that we had going on. So the key thing is to keep an eye on what's actually happening with the actual impulse move immediately right here. And we could have the potential pullback down to 61 because we have the clustering right here. And the key thing is around this 820 area is going to be the key area to actually see if we can get some hold around here, because at that point would still be above our high areas that we would have climbed up off of, and it would be a decent dip buying opportunity. At that point, we'd also be kind of holding more or less a trend zone right around that ballpark of that pullback. So don't expect immediate drop at this point, but if we just kind of start stair stepping down to this area, by the time it gets over into the close to this trend line, we could start seeing a potential curling back up to make another attempt. We're more or less getting an Elliott wave pattern development out of this thing. We just had this massive blow off top that happened here, and this is more or less a short squeeze because this was a light float, and it also had a decent amount of short interest built into it. Could be just a one-day wonder off of this massive pop. So the key thing is just let it pull back. The shares are hard to borrow, so you're not going to probably find shares to be able to borrow on this unless you're Whataburger has CFDs or something. But you can basically look for a potential dip buying over here for another run if we actually see some interest come back into it. But just keep an eye on the volume at the same time. COX is continuing its push. Like to see a little bit more of a thrust. We got over the 61 on the daily. I'd like to see a little bit more of a push back up and see if we can get up to about 96 area, no more than 100, and then start looking for the short side of it. If you want to take a swing, I guess you say, on the long side, it's really kind of late to be getting in it on the upside to go up to the D leg. But if you want to take it for a few points up, I mean, you can just start looking at the topping around 96 area for the pullback in there. You got to be careful when you get up to the 92 area. You're going to have possible cycles. So if you get into it, say Monday morning for the run up to it, just make sure you take profits at this zone and then continue it up until you get to the completion of the pattern, and then look for the short potential. There's going to be more money to be made on the downside move than the upside move, but there's still a lot of points to be made between the two, because you're looking at about $6 range to complete its pattern before you're going to have the nice massive pullback that'll get you 10 plus points. MTDR, we've got a little bit of a topping pattern happening up here. It's almost at 100%, not quite, but we've got a pattern that's kind of somewhat developed over here. Look at our last major move over here. So we're past the 88, we're going towards the 100 mark. So I'm looking for this thing to try to test that 100, and I want it to actually break through it over time, come back down, retest, confirm it's going to hold, and then start pushing up towards that 21 level. Key thing is $20 is going to be the problem. Once we hit that $20 zone, you can see the previous history where it's had problems with 20 before. That could be the end of the line, and we just barely got over it. But if we're going to get a really nice move for the downside, we really would like to have this thing push up to at least a 21 if we can get out of it. So you can kind of see the pattern is somewhat developed over the last quarter off of it. And so we're looking at somewhere around that ballpark. Now, it can come down, and sometimes we get the 113. That's why we use the 113, which would be about, 60, 76 over 20 bucks. This is probably a little bit more realistic since we've had a lot of history around the $20 area as being a pretty strong support resistance zone for it. But I'd like to see a little bit more of a pop for about a buck higher, and then look at a potential short position if we start seeing the topping and the failure of the curvature. If we see it holding well, then you can expect it to go to the 21.65 for an additional point. So you got about a 2-point possible move. 1 point, I would say, more or less, is more higher probability before we start looking for the downside off of that direction of it. LHX, we're pushing up to the 78 off of this larger pattern. It's been kind of a choppy wave down, and we finally got the correction off of the overall breakdown. We got a nice pop off the overall downtrend. We've pretty much finally broken. We pushed off of it. We pushed really hard off of that breakout. We've got a pattern still to be said. I'd still like to see this thing more or less come up to about 211, and then look for potential topping around there for a short to bring it back down for the overextension of the pop. It's a little too hard, too fast, so we should get a little bit more thrust out of it and just look for the failure back down, and then look for, a continuation bounce off of that once you get about a 38% drop off of that 78 zone area. DBD, we've got over same type of pattern more or less, but what I'm looking at it as, we're starting to get a little pullback already, but I'd really like to see if we could get this thing pushed up to about 1250-ish, right around this ballpark, right about where that red line's at, and then see if we can actually get the actual failure. This pullback that's happening right now isn't an overall what's happening with the pattern in general. What's happening is this push up is basically now profit taking's happening. We're getting a little bit of basically they're just getting out of their position, taking some profits up in this level. So if we can get some stabilization right around this area, around 11.75 or so, look for push back up to about 12.50, and at that point, I'd look for a potential short side move to bring it back down. Um, if it breaks down back to the 61 level at that, it's going to turn into a sideways grinding chart. So to basically just leave it alone at that point. So if you start seeing it get really close to $11, just back off of it. BRNS, like to see a little bit continuation push up here to about 202.5 for a potential pullback off of it. Not as a clean of a chart, but we've got that nice structure continuation push on it. Just more or less seeing that we finally got over 200. I've actually preferred to come back down to the 200 test and then look for a push. So look for a pullback and then a continuation push to about 211, then the downside, potential downside move. Don't have the new earnings coming out here, but you can see how far away that we had our last earnings. So it should be coming up real soon. Earnings season will be starting within the next week or so. SGRY, same thing. We're kind of grinding around the 113. We're holding pretty well, but I'd like to actually see a little bit continuation push up to about 17.18 and then look forward to the actual short. We're basically a little bit overextended push with no major pullbacks. We're just pretty much holding the trend line in general. I'd like to see one more thrust up into about 17.25 area and then look for a potential pullback down towards the 200 on the hourly chart. WIX, so patterns working real well off of what we've talked about in the past. We're still continuing its move. When we get up here, we're going to see more cycling when we get up to the 50% level at the 131 area, but it's starting to develop into a really nice continuation push. So if you took that when we were talking about that last week, then you're should be pretty well green in the money at this point. Look for some issues up here while 136, 7, around that ballpark on previous area where we'll see some heavy cycling happening around that area, but overall we'd want to see it continue pushing up higher. If we start getting too much of a breakdown around the 136 level, then that would actually be a invalid pattern at that point. SPCE got a nice re-push back towards the IPO level. I don't know why these numbers are even over here. We're holding above the 78, so I'd like to see a little bit of pushback up to the 88. We get down to that level, could have the potential pullback, but a lot of times when stocks, especially since their recent IPO, start getting up here, and this is the key area to kind of look for the breakdown. We're kind of grinding right now in this, so we either look for a potential pullback in this zone, or we're going to look for a pullback around the 88. We break above the 88, it's going to be game on to retest the IPO high. IPO high level is a key area because when you start breaking above that level, you'll get a pullback confirmation and you'll see investors will start liking that. And then you'll start seeing a lot of money start flowing in at that point for a continuation push to go further. Now, usually we need a little bit of a catalyst to kind of help that. So let's look and see if there's any possible PR that may be coming out in the near future on this one. But more or less, we've got a potential topping zone areas for a pullback if we don't really get any type of catalyst to push this thing up higher. The IPO levels are more or less, I look at them even up to 2 years back, guys. It doesn't really matter on timing. What it matters is what it does at this area, because we get above these areas and we hold, then it becomes where these things will have a lot of continuation plays, and that's the key thing to look at off of the any type of IPOs. the more recent the IPO, the more relevant it becomes also because it's more fresh in people's minds. FTNT, we're getting to the point of getting a little bit overextended on this thing. This thing can have a little bit continuation. This is also off of multi-quarter moves. So this is a slow moving stock that has been working very, very well. But you can see we're getting on the point where we're starting to get to that overextended level. We're pushing past the 41. We're kind of in between that and the 61. I'd like to actually see at this point, just go ahead and just push it a little bit further up to that 61 and look for a potential topping zone off of it around the 114, 115 level at that point. Like I said, this thing's going to be slow moving because it's taken so long to develop where we're at. This point, it's pretty much taken almost the whole year or a good half of the year to get to this area. We should start seeing some topping off of this because we've had too much of a run with no major pullbacks. It's just a matter of just being patient, waiting for time. There's going to be a lot more downside move to this once it finally gives it up than there's going to be on the upside move. So if you're in it, stay in it until you start seeing that reversal starting to occur. Because we've been talking about this one for quite a while. You need to be looking at taking profits and looking at potentially getting out of the position soon. If you're looking for a good setup, to start looking for that topping zone to be able to bring it back down. WVE had pretty terrible news. We got a drop, continuing drop. The stock, technically, you would say is dead. We got, what, dead cat thud, another dead cat thud. I mean, it's there wasn't even a dead cat bounce here. Thing is what's got me a little curious with this stock is HC Renwright's coming out with $20 PT. They're trying to push this thing back up towards that 200 on the hour. Why? There's something going on in the back end with this company here, guys. So look for this stock to have some possible PR coming out in the near future. If it has some sort of PR that comes out in this thing, now sometimes HC Renwright will set on things for weeks or months, so it may not happen next week. So, but definitely keep this thing like on a little side chart and stuff. Keep it on the back of your mind. Maybe just kind of pulling it up at least once a week, once a day, kind of like if you got a go-to chart, throw this thing on there because there's something going on in the back end that could give this thing a potential pop back up. The float's big enough that this, or small enough that this thing could actually have a pretty decent catalyst in it, or movement back on the upside if it gets that bounce. Off of that being said, look at the overall where we started from and where we're basing down to. What I want out of this when the news comes out is I want to pop up to that 23. This is some serious money that you could be making here. That's almost doubling your cash. You're in at $7 and you can get out at 15. So this is another reason why I'm interested in this thing, because when this thing decides to start running back up, you got about a 7-point move potentially coming into place on it. AYX got ourselves more or less. Let me clear this out. This is old data. We got more or less a pattern here developing off of it. I'd like to see a little bit more of a push up to about 808, 809, right around that ballpark, right around the 78's at, and look for a potential pullback on it. You got a nice little short term, and these are easier to play when you get them this close, because I mean this is what we look for more or less on our intraday traffic. So this could be not necessarily a swing, but something we could find once it hits these numbers that you play as a day trade. But you can actually kind of see we're starting to get to this point of a potential reversal pullback on it. And when it pulls back, you're going to get quite a few points on the downside move. So look for a potential push up to about 109 or so, and then look for a potential short setup on the AYX. Naked. All right, Naked, or recent reverse split, 1 to 100 on it. Still have no price action. This is a sleeper set here just waiting to happen. So let's go back and look at how far back that we've gotten. Where naked was, every time you get these splits, you get a nice little massive pop off of it and stuff, right? Of course, the splits can skew your actual price range numbers and stuff on that because this stock wasn't $1,000 at one time. This is basically just where the charts don't really keep up with the actual number. They're basically it's just a chart that screws up with the digits, you may say. At this point, more or less, look for initial pop to start with. Is we got the previous high right here at $6, so we can go off of this previous measure for more accuracy with the overall bigger picture of the actual massive legs that we've had back here in the past off of these higher levels. So first and foremost is when you get your first initial pop, whenever some sort of news winds up coming out on this thing, which it will, just a matter of time. This is the first measurement you want to basically look at. I don't know if I can get my numbers exactly right. This is going to be the first initial pop that you're going to wind up getting. And that's where you're going to see a push up to about $5, right around that ballpark. You see how we've hit this thing multiple times in the past. So when the news comes out, look for a potential pop for the $5 range. Once we start breaking up here, which we should break through these levels pretty quickly, this is basically just, if you're getting into this position and waiting for this news to come in, then just look for that initial take profits at this zone, because you will get a cycle back down a little bit, and then look for the push towards the previous all-time high for a continuation. At that point, you're going to want to start pulling back your numbers and start looking at the bigger picture moves to where we start having problems at 7, 9, and so on and so forth. And you just kind of continue pulling that back as you start seeing the run, because the float on this thing is going to be ridiculous to push this thing pretty hard. So just look for some catalyst to come out in this one in the near future. Deck, we've got more or less a patterns developed over the last quarter and a half or so, starting to get up to the 88 level. I'd like to actually see this thing, see if we can start seeing some topping off of it. They may be trying to push this to 100%. It's not really ready at this point to bring down. It has been a slow stair step, so there's nothing saying that this thing can't go to 100% gap fill and go further. But it's at an area that we want to keep an eye on. If we start seeing a potential topping over here, then you can start your short position off of it. Don't chase this thing up, because it's just a matter of where these levels is going to be before it starts bringing it back down. But it is one to kind of keep an eye on. It is a very slow moving stock. It is very choppy in the stock, so this may not be exactly the one for you if you're not willing to have patience with it. TPC, we're starting to develop a bigger picture pullback pattern over here. And so we had to push up to around the 88 level, and we're pulling down right here. So at this point, I'd like to start seeing a pullback that I should like to see some basing in this stock sense. The reason why I pulled this one up on the chart, it's not really ready to take yet on the long side. But I'd like to see this thing somewhere around this ballpark start settling down around the $11, $10 zone for a potential dip buying opportunity to bring this thing back up. Because I think where we're going to be developing out of this big picture, and this is a more of a long-term big picture idea here because of the way this thing's developing, but this is basically what I'm kind of looking for, more or less, out of a push eventually. So there could be some serious range of doubling your cash off of a potential dip buy over here. It's just a matter of finding the dip buying location at the same time. If we can get a catalyst that could come out to actually give us that pop. We are closer to the previous report than we are to the next report. So this thing could come down and start basing and grinding for a while and start heading back up slowly into the next earnings report. This is not going to be something that's going to move super fast, but this has got to more or less, we just got to find where our C leg's going to be at, settle down at, and then we can start taking a position into it for longer term, bigger picture. DRI, We've also got a basing. We've kind of got the development now of the C leg at this point. So this one's already kind of done what I'm talking about from the previous chart, where we're actually starting to get the actual basing bottom, which is more or less, this is not even the correct drawing tool I need to use. This is more or less a cypress at this point. So we've either got a cypress or we got a shark that's developed right here, because we've actually pulled past the A leg. So we look for more or less a push up with dicks up to this higher level. So I'm looking at more or less, oh, not dicks, excuse me, DRI. I don't know why I thought this was that. We're looking for more or less to see if we can get a push up to around 124, 125 zone over time. So we got the nice dip buying. We got the impulse leg here. We will have some problems at the 23 up here at 113. So it's got to be wary when you have that. And this is nothing saying that you can't be, taking profits. Because a lot of times on these swing trades, guys, I get into these things and I know where the big picture is going to ultimately take me, but I'll get in and I'll take profits at these areas, let it pull back and let it push back up through, pull back and retest that zone, add to my position, and then take it. And then my average of where I got in at, it just kind of moved up just slightly. And I'm taking it up for the next level and just keep doing that. I mean, that's when I was playing swinging beyond when it IPO, that's what I did. I just stair stepped it all the way up. So you just got to basically look at each individual day that you basically take these slow moving stocks that you can do that. And you just kind of keep an eye on it, put it on the side chart, and it doesn't take a whole lot of cash. I mean, depending on your account size, you can heavy load this, or you can just put in a few hundred shares and call it a day. Or if you're in the swing side, just buy a couple of contracts. CRC starting to get a nice little push up to the 50 and the hold right here. We got that pattern developing here. I wanted to break above the 50 and continue pushing up to the next leg, up to the 61, with ultimately coming up to towards the 78 in general. We got a real good pattern developed for this. We just got to look for the cycle base off of this. Once it gets where it's at right now, you don't necessarily want to chase it because this thing can cycle back down against you. You can either look at a dip buying pulling back down to the support area right here around $9.75, $10, and then look at for potential taking it up, or just wait for confirmation for it to break above the 50, come back, settle, test, and hold it, and then take it for the next leg up. Either way is the right way of doing it. It just depends if you are what type of a trader you are, more of a confirmation, or if you're more of one that's a front load side. So this one does have a good potential of moving. Now, of course, everything that I've said about all these trades and stuff, if we go to war all of a sudden, throw all this crap out the window, okay? Because market starts moving down, a lot of these upside patterns, the majority of the stuff I'm talking about is bullish. We'll get totally screwed up really quick. PXD, we're starting to get up to the topping zone, right around that 113 that we'd like to look for. We got already starting to get small pullbacks starting to take place in that area, right around this ballpark. Still has potential push up to the 158 level because it hasn't broken the trend yet, but we're starting to get some potential signs. If it breaks that trend, there's going to be game on to the downside. So start looking for a potential short opportunity, but be cautious because we are basically testing the trend line at this point. RUBY, we have already completed the pattern way beyond expectations. $10 is where we should have taken. That was our secondary price target. We've even gotten below that area. Now that we've come down to the 78 on the pullback level right here, I'd like to see some basing around this zone for potential, correction to start taking place. So start looking for start looking for a new setup around here. We've actually, when we get these type of patterns that complete so beautifully like this, we got to look at it as there's now a potential of a new pattern that has developed on the opposite side. So now that we were bearish, now we can become bullish and have the potential pop back up of a push back to 38 to 61% off of this impulse leg on the downside move. So start looking at a potential entry point off of RUBY for potential move back up. MAR, It's already starting to break down off the pattern. We were talked about this previous week, the potential short. We've already now starting to test that downward trend. We get past that, then we're going to be game on the downside move off of this. So look for this as a potential falling apart. You know, of course, if the market pulls, this will help this stock out quite a bit. FANG got a little bit further to go. Been talking about this one over the last couple of sessions. Needs to look for completion, getting close to about 97 or so, and then start looking for a potential short position off of that. We could get a push all the way to 100. You got to be a little bit cautious on the entry, but at the same time, we're starting to get up to that completion area. If you're in that position that we talked about, you need to start looking at taking profits on this one soon. EPZM, we're starting to get to the point of overextension now, and we're touching the 127 right now. I'd like to start seeing this thing start to pull back. We've basically been on a beautiful run, never broke the trend basically since the last earnings report. I'd like to start seeing this thing have a topping on it soon and start looking for a little bit of a pullback coming back down on it. And Roku doesn't have a massive pattern. I mean, we played it from the downside, the up, back and forth. We played this huge pattern. We got that pattern completed at this point. Now we've got some micro sideways action in Roku. I'd like to see Roku give us a small move over here. Just a small one. Not looking for anything major. Well, get my drawing tool screwed up here. When I'm looking for this, not that big picture here. This is more intraday swing for maybe a few days. Got a little bit of a curvature because it's having problems with the 200 over here. So this is not exactly the best chart in the world. But I'd like to see Roku push back up towards that daily 61 level overall. I'm looking for about 146 in general on it. But you see, we're kind of in the sideways grind right here. So more or less look for the potential of Roku for a long side move over here on it. But this is not as big of a picture as we had back in the previous areas that we were doing way over here, because this was a bigger picture we were playing. We were playing for massive points. I'm not looking for massive points here with Roku. I'm only looking for about a 10-point move. So this is a smaller move overall, but if we hold on to this level, we've got it. Key thing is we're holding the 50 right now. If we start sinking below that 50 or we have a market sell-off, this whole pattern will go to shit real quick. So you got to be careful with it. This thing could just completely just tank if the market starts selling off. So just be very cautious in Roku at this point. But I do see a small potential push up for 10 points as long as the market stays steady in the way it's going. And that's pretty much what I've got for this coming week, guys. Let's see if anybody's got anything they want to talk about. And let's see. Anybody posted anything in the chat or just pop up on the mic?
Dark Side, hi. I have a couple.
What you got?
I've got LEN, L-E-N. It's creating a base here.
Yeah, you got a little bit of a pattern developing. It's a little noisy because there's been a lot of back and forth action on it, but it's starting to look like you got that base effect. You got that got a kind of a crappy pattern here because of the choppiness it's created.
Now I'm watching it on the daily.
Instead of a crab, that's a crap pattern.
Yeah, I mean it's there, but it's just that the back and forth and how big the wicks are. That's why I call it kind of a crappy one, because you get in this thing, and if you get in at the wrong timing, next thing you know is you're red, and you're over here trying to make it up with this one. This is the problem because you got these huge wicks. But once this thing gets going, it should take off pretty good on you, because you see how the downside out of the big long wicks you had on those. So I think I can see a push to at least probably the 200 over here to start with.
Dark Side, look at it on the daily.
Got the earnings on the 7th.
Look at the flag it's creating.
Well, on the daily perspective, that actually is more or less more of a downside pattern. Because if you look at the overall picture that we had here, we've got almost a completion of a pullback. And so at that point on the daily chart, you look at the last leg that you ran, you should look for a pullback to 38 to start, which we've already hit, and we're holding on to it with potential to the 61. So now we see that the 38 has hit and completed this hold right here. This grind session with that earnings coming into place could be the potential catalyst that we need to pop it back up. But if they miss on their earnings, it's going to immediately come down to this level here.
Right.
What you got?
I got, what else do I got? HXL.
A little bit of a basing down here, looks like. Getting ready to pop into the daily 200 in about a point. So you got to be careful with that area there. But you do have a somewhat of a development here with the push-pull action here. It could be the start, but you're going to have some problems with getting into this thing right up here and popping straight into that. So if you get into it, just realize about a buck higher, you're going to have some issues right away. It'd almost be better to kind of let it come up here and test it, hold above it, and then take it for a bigger picture long. But you also got the earnings coming up on that one in a few days too. They do good on their earnings. I think should start really flying up.
Another one is Wing, WING. Let's see if it's trying to cross above the breakout and push.
Yeah, it's holding the 200 well, so that could be a potential continuation push. Came down, tested the 50 on the downside. We got the 50 under that's curled underneath it. We were hiding on the 200, so now it's a pretty decent looking chart for continuation. We don't have to worry about earnings for a while. We got a good month and a half out for that to deal with. I think more or less, if you're going to take a long, just see if you can get it to hold above this previous candle level. If it can hold above that level, because you got a lot of resistance, you can kind of see that's kind of like your key zone right here. This will be a decent area for a continuation push. Let's try to turn that into your support, your stop loss zone.
Another one is BA, showing me a little bit of a basing. See what it wants to do here.
BA, I trade this one way too much, you can tell. Can't see my candlesticks anymore. A little bit of a basing. I wouldn't probably really play this one until it gets at least gets on the other side of that 13 EMA on the daily. Thing is with BA, all they got to do is come out with a news catalyst for the day, and that thing's just going to start moving back up if it's positive. So, but you see how we're kind of in this sideways box action in NBA, where you see that for the last couple of quarters is just this back and forth crap. So I like it, but I kind of want a news catalyst at the same time.
Yeah. Another one is BTAI, but this one is now for shorts. It's creating a little bit of a topping, hitting my 1990 resistance up there.
I think it'd have a little bit more room to go. Had a nice pullback when I hit that one. That blew through that 116 leg. Now this one's a little bit more tricky. Let's look on an hour chart so you can see what's something cleaner. That's still pretty strong with flags. It's almost like a stair step in there, Jenny.
Yep.
It's holding moving average as well. I mean, it's not even pulling back to the 13. What's our momentum is still okay. Stochastics is kind of curling. I think this one still may have a little bit of time before it goes. I'd like to see it actually come back up to that 18 level and see if we can get a rejection off of it before I would probably think about shorting it.
Another one is SWKS. Off that topping came down to the 117.95 support right now.
So what was that ticker again?
SWKS.
Yeah, it's already starting to curl.
Yep. And the next support I have on it is all the way down to 106.
I think the trend line 112 is going to be the first stop.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just go for the last major impulse here. It's also your 38 on for that last impulse leg too. So yeah, I'm okay with you shorting it. Just that 117 and a half area, that was the key area. We could get a potential bounce off of that. So it needs to get underneath that. You get underneath that, then you're going to have it down to 112 and a quarter. Little bit of a chase right now, so it's almost just kind of wait for the confirmation of that break of that 117 and a half level first, or at the potential bounce at 130, 116 and a quarter. So you got that dollar zone you got to play with right here.
Yeah. ERI, ERI.
That one looks like a nice pattern. Got a nice development here. Pull back. Before we go with that one. Right up to the 127 rejection. Almost perfect, isn't it? Yeah, that one's beautiful there. I love it. So we know where we're at, where we topped off at. So let's look at the pullback now. Let's go ahead and short this sucker. This is ultimately what we want is this. We want this pullback. We want it down. You see how I hit that 38? We want that 38. We want the 51, 78. Because we had to dip by and push back up, this needs to be more relevant right at this moment. So look for this potential problem here at 56. Once we get past that, then of course you're going to hear 61, which is previous high level also. So these are areas for immediate taking for your like intraday purposes. Swing trade, we're looking at more or less this for the downside move. Overall bigger picture and time to come down to 151.78 start.
Another one is CBRE. Also showing me a topping.
Yeah, he's starting to get the reversal breakdown. So Yeah, pull back of about 56.88. Needs to break the trend line though. It's on a solid upward trend, but it's way overextended on that trend line. You got anything else?
Yeah, the Cuervo we talked about last week.
Was it QUVRE or something like that?
QRVO, Cuervo. That worked very nice.
Yeah. Still working. And take their first profits at 108.38. Probably get a little cycle there, but let's try to bring it down to 103.13 ultimately.
I don't have anything else.
Okay. He's got some people posted some stuff in the chat, so. GD. It's a Tim posted there. What time frame are you looking at there, Tim?
I was looking at the daily chart. I was looking for a defense sector stock that wasn't already overextended.
Looks like the rain is delayed me slightly.
Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Looks like
yeah, this is a defensive sector stock, but it doesn't move. Let's see if I can mute the person that's not muting themselves.
So it's got a float of 268 million, average true range of $2, and average daily volume of 1.24 million. And it doesn't look overextended. So I thought if there's going to be extended conflicts, this might be a defense sector stock to look at.
This would be definitely one to look at for that. You're not going to probably get as much out of it as Lockheed, because Lockheed's kind of like what everybody knows about. But this is definitely one that's more or less when it gets on its you can see what's done in the past. When it gets its mindset on a trend, it's pretty hard bullish. So right now it's in that consolidation factor. You almost got like a flag formation that's kind of developed over the last year. So this little problem we're having right now could be enough to bust that flag out. So yeah, I do like that. It's not already taking off, but I would be more bullish than bearish just because the conflict is, I think no matter what happens this current week, I don't think things are going to settle down. I mean, we're talking about, religious warfare, more or less, has been going on since the creation of time. So there's just going to be another issue whether things settle down a little bit over the next week or if they escalate. It's still going to be a stock to be looking at. You're more or less looking at the pattern for since September is what you're looking at.
Got a Gartley pattern that's, I've got the X around the beginning of September.
Yeah.
It's got a uptrend there that it kind of broke through and regained, and it's got the 200 and the 50 on the daily chart. It's right at that 50. So that's immediate resistance right there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like you had a pattern here, the small, and then you had the pullback, and now that was basically starting of the larger, bigger picture pattern. So yeah, I think you're on the right track. I mean, push up into earnings going up to like the 78.88 leg. Yeah, I wouldn't see anything wrong with that. Only thing we got currently a problem with is we're kind of like is at the 50 right now. We're touching. We just got to kind of go over that hump on the daily on the 50.
Right.
We're good to go on the hourly though.
Yeah.
Let's see what our MAC's doing. The MAC's not liking it too well. That's kind of surprising with all that action with all that news yesterday. That is kind of surprising. The MACD is not exactly there.
Yeah.
The daily MACD looks like it's getting ready though.
Yeah, on the daily, the stochastics is at the bottom and it's curled up. So I think that looks.
I think you may just have a pullback on the hourly level before you have a push up. So I wouldn't necessarily get in right this moment. I'd be keeping an eye. You got that big picture idea on the daily chart. So I would just pay attention to the hourly and the 15-minute chart to see if you can see a decent entry, because I think you may have a little bit of a pullback a little bit more with this trend. Maybe even a pullback down to this level here before you have a continuation pop. I just let that MACD clear up. Now, if we have another major incident between now and Monday, this thing could just pop out of the in pre-market or the hour and correct this problem that we're having right here real fast. This could be a quick fix if we have negative news come out in the market about war. So, but if we don't have anything continuing, then I would say this thing's probably going to pull back just a little bit before it pushes up.
Yeah.
So if you're going to swing it, you can just get in. Just realize you may have a little bit of a pullback. If you're going to play a day trade, I just hold off maybe an hour or two.
Okay. How about some of the cyber names for the conflict? I think maybe the risk of a cyber attack is high, so some of the cyber names might do well, like Crowd or.
Could. I had to research a little bit more on that. Who's actually the leader of that industry? Symantec's probably going to be the big one. I believe they have government contracts, if I recall. So that'd probably be one of the big ones to look at. So I know they're involved with the government.
There was an alert that just came across that the Iran has targeted. I come up with 35 U.S. targets for retaliation.
Yeah, they're talking about attacking destroyers and stuff, so good luck with that.
Well, about 10 years ago, when I was in the Air Force, we were talking about Iran, and at that time they had reports that they had a whole bunch of sleeper cells all over the world for doing terrorist attacks if anything like this happened. And so any soft targets like malls or anything like that, they were looking at setting up sleeper cells with like pre-planned directives on things to attack. So I'm sure that's just grown.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not just U.S. based. Also, I'm sure that any of our allies, even Europe or Asia, is potential problems also.
Yeah, this is something that Iran's been planning for 40 years.
Yeah. I don't think the problem's going to go away anytime soon. So we just got to be somewhat cautious with it. As far as how much it's going to actually impact the market, it just depends on how serious it starts getting. As right now, the market is just playing a pre-planned itinerary, you may say. And this is kind of a speed bump for it right this moment, but it could turn into a serious issue soon. So you just got to kind of keep an eye on the news.
You need to take a look at blue.
Starting to slowly work. Still holding the downtrend though. We gotta get past that for it to be game on.
That's what I was thinking. But the 50 is now underneath it. It hit, went above 23, and the 50 got underneath it now.
That's good. Yeah, so we should just gotta break that trend line here. As long as it holds this trend, it's kind of like in that pinnacle point. It's holding this trend and it's trying to break that trend. So it's a matter of which one gives up.
Yeah. Okay.
So as long as we don't have any major market corrections, I'd say it's going to probably break through and push up towards the 200. If we have a market correction, then it could just break this trend line and just kind of screw the whole idea up. So just be a little careful with it. It's a biotech, so I don't expect it to move with the market too dramatically, but it's a big ticker name that people go to also in that sector. Let's see what else we got in the chat. Under Armour. Under Armour's still more or less kind of a grind. I mean, I like how it's holding this previous level. We had that bounce off the 61. So kind of a sideways action right this moment with Under Armour. If you can keep this thing at its head above water here on this 38 pullback right here, then you look at a potential continuation push, because you do have a Cypress pattern that has kind of developed right here off of it over the last quarter or so. So you look for more or less a push up to right around here. This is ultimately what I would be trying to shoot for with Under Armour. With earnings coming up, if they do well in earnings, then you can see a pop up to about 24 to 25 and a half, somewhere around there. But all depends on the earnings report. I don't really know what to think about them too much because they've had all this problems with the feds recently. So that's kind of seems to be forgotten about. Nobody's really talking about it. So I haven't looked to see if there's any new development on it. Target, I would stay somewhat bullish with it as long as the market continues its upward structure. We are getting a pullback on it. It is breaking the trend line over the last we're starting to break down off of the trend that's had over the last month for a little bit of a pullback. We hit the 113 for the pull. So I'd like to see a little bit of a pullback for continuation going into the earnings. I got a feeling they'll probably knock it out of the park again on the next earnings. So at this point, look for Target to pull back to about the 38 right now, about 122, 26, probably wind up stabilizing around that area for potential going into the earnings report for potential higher side moves on it. I'm not really expecting it. Let's just say it can pull back down to the 113, but I don't see it going below that. So right now, I don't really see a good setup in Target right this moment to play it. It's kind of in between setups. MDB. I don't really see any quality setup in that one either. We're just kind of sideways grinding right now. I don't really see any advantage in it. Okay, TA. That one's kind of almost in the same boat. It's just kind of a sideways grind. We had the pattern and the pullback. You see the pattern completed on the pullback of the 38. And it's holding the 50 off of it. So usually when we get it past the 38, we get the 61. We didn't get that. We're kind of grinding 58. So this is more of a sideways chart right this moment. I don't see any advantage in it. Because this pattern played out right here perfect, or the bigger picture, either one. There's like same thing pretty much. It's just that one took longer versus the other. And it's pulled back, and now the profit's already happened. So now you got profit taking happening. And so you're basically in that sideways zone. It needs a new setup. ADXS. Looks like that's about a 23 pullback off of that big drop. I had a guess at it. Not even there. Looks like something a little tighter because we ain't getting it on that. Yeah, wrong deal. Where am I doing? Here we go. Pushing 50% off of this last leg here, so let's start slowly creeping up. It's holding trend well. We got past the previous breakout, pulled back, tested the hold for continuation. So should have a continuation move on it. See a push back up to 141. Have a little bit of problems there with a cycle. Ultimately, you probably get up to about 175 before it probably start fading off a little bit. To get some sort of news catalyst, then toss this out the window and look for a push up to about 275 or something like that. Overall, bigger picture. But it's just a slow creeping stock right now. It's nothing really great about it. It looks like it had a split way back in March, but I mean that's so far back. Usually the reverse splits happen within the quarter or so. So Shake Shack. That's pretty much just grinding right now. I don't see any advantage in Shake Shack right now. I would just say just wait until the earnings comes out. If they do well, they have a nice little pop, but we're just basically just grinding on some structure levels right now. They're about halfway through earnings right now, so I don't expect anything out of it right this moment. You start seeing a little bit of a curvature and get higher highs, and you can tell they're kind of trying to bite into earnings, which could start happening because you see how they do a lot of times where they'll go sideways for a while and then they'll start creeping up. You could start having the basing here for a potential push into the earnings. Because if you go through their earnings, after the earnings, they do that quite often. Right after the earnings, they'll go sideways for about a month or so before you start seeing some movement. So I think it's pretty much found its bottom and base right now. So I think you'll eventually get a push up going into earnings slowly. All right, go ahead and shut the recording off. If y'all guys want to talk off of the recording, you can.